Leaders think out of the box. We must be willing to question assumptions and also learn to laugh. Laughter in a group, laughter in a team, it can bond you together like very few things can. Well, today on episode 4 of the Calm and Confident Leader podcast, I get to sit down with Stevie Ray, a lifelong corporate trainer, business owner, and improv aficionado. So, welcome to the Calm and Confident Leader. But before I dive into today's conversation, I've got a free gift for you called the Total Package Playbook. It's your guide to getting clarity, not just at work, but in all aspects of life. It includes a clear strategy to get you unstuck and growing again. You can pick up your free copy at totalpackageplaybook.com. Now, let's chat with Stevie Ray. Stevie is a successful keynote speaker, corporate trainer, entertainer, author, happy husband, and frazzled stepdad. In addition to his role as the executive director of Stevie Ray's Improv company, he has been a nationally recognized speaker, corporate trainer since 1989, where probably most of my listeners weren't even born yet. The author of 12 books. He's also a national columnist for the Business Journal newspapers for 25 years. He's traveled the country helping organizations master the art of influence and sharpen professional skills. His clients include Fortune 500 companies and small organizations alike. Welcome to the show, Stevie.
Thanks for having me.
So when I lived in Minnesota, and I lived there for almost 15 years, I actually was a student at your improv school there in Chanhassen, took a number of the different things there. And so, and that's, I think, where we first connected. I got you on email there, but I found the improv classes really to be helpful in my ability to laugh, but also to think better on my feet. And for me anyway, it helped me to be okay with not having everything perfect. I'm such a calculated thinker, and particularly in leadership, and so I wanted to get better at just being okay with not being okay at times. So. From what I understand, you go into companies and actually teach some of the things that I was learning in that improv school. Tell us a little bit about how that looks.
Well, I mean, when we first started Stevie Ray's Improv Company 35 years ago, my co-director and co-founder, her name is Pamela Main, we knew that improv was a good skill off the stage. So it can help people with a lot of different life challenges and professional development. So we were kind of the first to market improv outside of the performing arts. And we reached out to regular folks. And after running a few classes and students coming back saying, "Oh, this is really helpful," I remember one day one of our students came up to us and said he was an account rep. And he said, "I used that technique you taught me last week during a conversation with a client, and it really helped manage a difficult situation well." And I said, "Great, that's what we were hoping for." And he said, "Have you ever thought of going to organizations directly instead of waiting for individuals to come to you?" And we had not thought of offering corporate training because at the time, improv wasn't done for that. Um, but we always worked on kind of a one-word business plan at Stevie Ray's, and that word is okay. So when he said that, we said, "Oh, okay, sounds like a plan." It was a challenge at the time because nobody knew improv, uh, really. It was a smaller sect of performing arts. Most people who said, "I love improv," actually were referring to stand-up comedy. They were saying, "I love improv. I just saw Richard Pryor last week." Um, so we had a lot of explaining to do. And also, because it hadn't been done in the business world, in the workplace, a lot of people said, "Oh, are you going to try to make us funny?" And so it took a long, long time to kind of get through that misunderstanding about what its true purpose was. And at its core, improvisational techniques, as they were developed in the 30s through the 50s, were really focused on listening skills, teamwork, working together to solve a problem, all the things that the workplace thrives on. And so that kind of became the quickest growing part of our company, the fastest growing. And nowadays, improv training in the workplace is actually common. There are a lot of uh, famous CEOs who say, "Oh, I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't take improv." So after 35 years, it's become a whole different animal for us. But
Sure.
basically, when a client calls and says we're interested in the training, we say, "What's going on? What's the problem? What are the challenges you face?" And if it's a healthcare organization, it could be helping physicians learn how to connect with patients better and develop trust, because that's a difficult challenge in that kind of relationship. It could be a group, a law firm who says we need to think quickly in the courtroom, or we need to learn to network better to gain more clients. So over the years, we've kind of been surprised as to how many professions and industries are interested in this. Anything from education to insurance to retail to manufacturing facilities, teaching foremen how to deal with clients without pissing them off. You know,
Yeah.
every kind of application you can imagine has kind of grown out of this.
So you start though with what is the challenge that you're dealing with, whether it's we're not working well as a team, or it's something external, or we're just not in tune with our emotions. I mean, do you get into any of what is typically reserved for counselors? Do you get into anything like what's going on internally that may be hindering people from being able to work their best?
We don't get into that, they do. Uh,
Okay.
Throughout the workshop, people start because there are certain concepts that are unique to improv training, and certain guidelines that we follow. And when you start exposing like, for instance, we'll say, all right, everybody get up and form a circle of between 6 and 8 people. And you're going to do this game, you're going to do this exercise. And then they do it and they discover just how challenging it is. They laugh a lot, but then when they're done, they say, man, that was hard. You experienced that yourself when you took
Right.
an improv class.
Right.
It's very challenging and very fun. But at the end of the exercise, we'd say, how many noticed this happening? And how many saw that that got in the way of you being able to work together? And everybody says, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that starts getting people to think, oh, was I the problem? Why am
Yeah.
I not finding this as easy as I thought it would be?
Okay.
Uh, and
So
so
I would think the debriefing then is just as critical as the actual improv, or maybe even more important, correct?
the debrief is part of the 3 steps. You do the game, then you debrief it, then you do the game again so you can do it the right way. And in
Okay.
fact, in the world, um, improv has become such an important part of training for the workplace that it has its own terminology now. It's called applied improvisation. And there are conferences where improv professionals from around the world will gather to discuss applied improv. And it has nothing to do with being funny, it has nothing to do with the performance aspect of it. It's, well, who do you work with? Oh, I primarily work with, you know, the corporate sector or the private sector or government employees or whatever. Um, Everybody looks at it from the debrief perspective. And there are very specific ways to debrief, and the method you choose depends on what kind of group you're working with, what kind of challenges they're facing, whether they're a team in trouble or a team that's high functioning. All different outcomes come from one of the 6 methods, basically, of debriefing. So we're very intentional about how we do that.
So the debriefing, just to go a little deeper on that, is it a set of questions that each has a different framework of questions? Is it the importance of the question that it determines, what questions you use?
Well, I'll give you an example. One of the 6 methods is, some refer to it as preloading. If you have a group that has experienced a lot of challenges and they're not really doing that well, the last thing they need is another failure. So you say to them before they start the exercise, now this is what most people experience while doing it. So it's something you want to look for to make sure you don't fall into that trap. And then they have a more successful experience. And at the
Hmm.
end, they get to cheer and say, we did it. And then you build from there. Other groups say you have a group that's resistive to training because they think they know it all. Well, you let them fail. You put them into a situation that they realize, I guess we don't know it all. And I guess this dork at the front of the room might have something to teach us. And
Mm,
so then you say, what did you, if it's a group that knows how to communicate, you can leave it open ended. What did you experience?
mhm.
I worked with a group like that just last week, and I knew them to be very communicative and very in touch with how they perform. So they would say, we've noticed a lot of things. And I would say, great, where is this going to show up in your work? And we
Mm,
always point it back to, what are you going to do with this now? What
mhm.
change are you going to make in your daily activities to make sure that this is of benefit to you? Because we're adding more tools to your toolbox. Make sure you know to use them.
Right.
Groups that are a little bit less confident, say, we because we do workshops anywhere from 10-year-olds on up to 100.
Mhm.
Um, if you're dealing with youth, uh, they don't know what they're looking at, and if they do, they don't want to say it because that's
Mhm.
kind of how it is being young. So the questions you ask them are quite a bit different than the questions you ask people who've been around for a while.
Sure, sure. Now, so on this podcast, we talk a lot to leaders, people who are overseeing other people. They're taking people to a place that they're not currently, whether they be executives, CEOs, supervisors, pastors, whatever. So, how can improv training actually help us who are leaders become better leaders?
First, by recognizing that there is no one style of leadership. And one of the worst things I hear from the leaders I've worked with over the years is this phrase: I've always found it best to fill in the blank.
Right.
Okay. Well, that means it's worked for you, but you're not recognizing when it hasn't worked for you.
Mm,
Those type of leaders tend to surround themselves with people who are best served by that one style of leadership, and everybody else goes to someone else. Great
mm,
leaders know that the person sitting in front of you has a very unique perspective, and you, as a leader, it's your job to get the best out of everybody you work with. Poor leaders simply fire the bad ones and keep the good ones without recognizing there's no such thing. Everybody's good at something. It's your job to find out what it is and to mine all that gold you can instead
right.
of labeling them bad and get them out of there. So, an improvisational mindset keeps you open to what is this person's perspective and how can I get them to where I need them to be in as effective way I can to keep the relationship strong, keep them confident, because your job is to make sure they dive into every situation with full confidence, because that's the only way they're going to solve problems and gain new clients and grow. And improv means there is no right or wrong answer. There's what you do with it. And
Mhm.
if you follow that process, it keeps your mind open to going in different directions. And
Mhm.
I always talk about this in my workshops. Every person you deal with is approaching you on the basis of their culture. And most people think of culture as what country you were raised in, or what region in the United States, or what faith you may or may not have.
Mhm.
Um, I always say the real culture is your family.
Mhm.
Who raised you?
Mhm.
Because if it was a boisterous, loud, get in your face type of family you grew up in, you're going to carry that for the rest of your life. You're
Mhm.
going to change and grow with experience, but that's going to be your core.
Mhm.
In fact, most psychologists use the 6-year-old model, basically saying your personality is set by 6 years old. And whatever
Mhm.
you've experienced up to that point, that's kind of going to be your personality for the rest of your life.
Wow.
In fact, the United Way had a program called Success by Six, which recognized if we can get to every kid before they're 6 years old and make sure they're solid, you're going to be okay. And if
Mhm.
it's not by then, it's just going to take a lot more work. So your family culture dictates how you work with people and what
Mhm.
kind of expectations you have. what upsets you, what frustrates you, what you appreciate, what you don't respect, what you do respect. So if we recognize that everybody sitting in front of us had a family that raised them to a certain age and gave them what they are, then we know, oh, now I can be flexible instead of just saying, here is you at work.
Mm.
And that's another mistake people make is they just look at people as a work function instead of, oh no, you know,
Yeah.
we're all walking around as a bunch of 6-year-olds.
Yep. Yeah, no, that is so in line too with what we talk about on this podcast because we just talk about how your personal life, your relationships, all of those things, you bring that all into work. It's not, and I think the what I think you makes us a little bit more unique is we're looking at the whole picture and saying all of those things are impacting all of those other things. But one of the things that if I could use this word from what you're saying, what I'm hearing you say for leaders is really this word humility. I'm actually working
Yeah.
on a book right now on the topic of humility. And I just really believe that humility is one of the core keys to all of life, but especially in leadership. Because I hear you using the words like open and flexible, and and it seems to be leaders need to come in with that humility rather than trying to prove themselves, rather than trying to say I'm in charge, those kinds of things. Would you agree? Is that a good way to summarize?
Yeah, there is the old classic top-down command and control model. Um, and that was pretty much in place, I would say, up until the end of the 60s, largely because the assumption was, I mean, most of the workplace throughout history has really mirrored military
Mhm.
format. And a lot of people said, okay, if you're a great leader when you were in the service, then you're going to be a great leader at work. They've discovered that is and is not true because everybody who has their own experience will come out of those forces differently. But they've discovered that the command and control style has a singular application where it is absolutely necessary during an emergency.
Mm,
When the ship is sinking, you don't want to sit around and have a committee meeting.
right.
You need one person to say, you go do this, you go do that, and all of you people over here, buh, 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 buh. You need that. And humans respond very effectively to command and control during an emergency. As soon as the
Mhm.
emergency is passed, we don't want it anymore and we don't respond well to it. And people who engage in command and control can still have humility.
Mhm.
Um, like, for instance, there are many branches of the military right now that have gone to more or less of a pod controlled, where a group of 8 people will consort with each other and figure out a solution rather than just the highest ranking person barking orders. So they're recognizing that even in many situations in the military, that's called for.
Mhm.
Um, and I think it's important to recognize the difference between humility and being humble, because being humble uh, might cause one to not acknowledge one's own successes. And it is
Oh,
important to know, like all the people I work with, I tell them, uh, you've got to live your successes. And that is not being arrogant. That is being realistic and saying, wow, am I really good at this?
mhm.
And the reason I push for that is kind of goes on the neuroscience of the human brain.
Mhm.
The problem with the human brain as it has evolved is it's really been evolved to keep us safe from harm. And so it's always looking out for danger. The outcome of that is there are twice as many receptors in the human brain to receive negative input than there are to receive positive. And
Mhm.
that's a good safety measure for us because it keeps us from getting hurt.
Right.
I mean, if you find a bush full of berries to eat, that's positive input. It's not as important as looking out for the bear that wants those berries.
Right.
So the problem with that as a leader is, and we've all heard this, it takes 10 compliments to cancel out one critique. That's because of the way the brain is wired. It's not a personality disorder. And that really is, it goes back to how we were raised. But no matter how you were raised, we still all have the same neuroscience, a
Mhm.
lot of receptors that latch on to negative input.
Mhm.
So a leader that has humility is likely more able to compliment others
Mhm.
because humility is actually a sign of strength.
Mhm.
Humbleness is often a sign of doubt.
Mm.
You don't want that. You want confidence with the ability to extend it to somebody else.
Mhm.
Uh, it's
Yeah.
interesting to me as I study different things, how many of them come back to improv
Mhm.
because studying neuroscience shows that a lot of the things that keeps the brain healthy, we've already been doing in improv for decades. Um, I study the martial arts. I've been a martial artist for close to 50 years, and I teach self-defense. One of the concepts we talk about a lot is owning your space. Bullies seek a victim, not a challenge. So if you own your space, nobody will bother you. Well, we talk about the fact that owning your space doesn't mean you try to occupy somebody else's. You give them their space while you occupy yours, and you allow everybody to own their space and grow in the best way possible.
Mhm.
That's what improv asks you to do. Is everybody's idea is given equal weight? Even the ideas we don't agree with, we say, cool, that had a place. We're not
Mhm.
going to use it, but it was there.
Right.
But a leader that has humility will allow everybody to own their space
Mhm.
instead of the leader occupying all of your spaces and trying to just control you.
Right. Yeah, and the definition I've been using with humility is an accurate assessment of yourself. So it's really, hey, I'm really good at this. I'd want to be in charge of X, but you know what? I really suck at this. I just can't handle it. So I need to surround myself with people who are really good at Y while I get to do what I'm best at, which is X. And I think that honest and accurate assessment, I think when we get out, I think what you're describing as humble is really, I think oftentimes just a way of masking our insecurities.
Yes.
We're just like, oh yeah, I just should apply to be a speed bump. Nothing else I can do in life. Like that whole idea of yeah, that's not real true humility because humility is an accurate assessment, which I'm good at this, I'm not so good at this. So
And
yeah,
we're not supposed to be good at this.
right, exactly.
Fallacy that people have weaknesses is just that. I've had
Right.
a lot of people ask me, I've done workshops for people who are looking for work. Uh, I've been asked by different municipal organizations who run workforce councils. And they always ask, what do I say if I'm asked in an interview, what are your weaknesses? And my response is, there is no such thing. There are things I am meant to do. Have me do those. If I fail at something, it means I was asked to do something I shouldn't have been doing in the first place. That's management's fault, really.
Mhm.
When you look at it, you shouldn't have been asked to do that. You don't buy a fish and say, why aren't you flying? You
Mm.
bought a fish.
Right. Right.
And like there's the whole fear of public speaking. We'll take that as an example. The greatest fear among adults, every year that they're surveyed, public speaking is at the top of the list. And so a lot of people ask, well, what can I do to overcome my fear of public speaking? And what they've discovered based on, because neuroscience has a great way of scanning the brain during tests and seeing what lights up and what parts of the brain are activating will tell you if it's the good part or the part you don't need, the panic part or the thinking part. Well, they discovered the best way to get over a fear of public speaking is to think of the last time you did it well and relive that moment in as minute detail as you can. What was I wearing? What did I say? What time of day was it? What you're doing is you're flooding the brain with positive memories of success that fools the brain into thinking it's going to happen again. What
Mm.
we normally do is say, what did I do wrong last time?
Yeah.
Because I want
Right.
to avoid that mistake. You know what you're
Hmm.
doing? You're making sure you're going to do that mistake again. Because anything we
Hmm.
focus on, we do. A good leader, then, as a result, will remind people of their successes constantly because all
Hmm.
that leader really wants is a repeat of success.
Mm,
A bad leader will say, now let's remember we did this last time and it didn't work so well. Okay,
mhm.
you've just screwed it.
Right.
Anybody make that mistake again. I've had troop members of my company come up to me and say, what can I do to get better? And I say, nothing. And they're not ready for that answer. They said, well, what
Hmm.
do you mean I got to get better? I say, you know how you'll get better? Just keep doing it. Keep doing the things you're good at. And what happens is, as a result, we stretch ourselves out of our comfort zone automatically. By being really good at something, we expand it. If we try to fix things that are wrong, we never leave the comfort zone. So we never grow. We never experiment. We
Mm,
never broaden. So a good leader makes sure that that unknown area is safe. It's like,
mm,
you're going to be fine. I'm right here.
mm,
And when you get out there and find out that it's a little scary, don't worry about it. You're successful no matter what. Those people really produce the most for any organization. The ones that are constantly complimented, and that allows them to grow. The
mm.
leaders who don't do that, and when I used to be a columnist for the Business Journal, talked about this a lot. I got some pushback. I got letters to the editor or emails directly to me, and I could tell who sent me the email. Um, People who were insecure,
Mm.
because there was a leader who said, this is a bunch of BS because people have to be held accountable and they have to be pushed and blah, blah, and everybody has to hear the truth. And sometimes the truth isn't fun and whatever. And I thought, yeah, your team hates you. I can guarantee you. And your productivity sucks. And I know
Mhm.
why, because that's not how you get the most out of people. That's how you feel like you're the king. Well, good for you. You're the king, and you're just going to fire people you think are inadequate instead
Mhm.
of helping figure out what they're good at and then getting that done.
Now this is really fascinating because it's very worldview jarring for me, particularly in the space that I travel a lot, which is in coaching and helping people get better and coming alongside of leaders. So how do you deal with that idea of growth? Like you said, like you have people in your troops saying, "How do I get better?" I know you say keep doing more of it, but are you still for people growing and getting better, or you just
If
even think that
they
getting better is a misnomer?
they will get better. Everybody gets better. It's how fast they do it or not. Here's how they not. It's you telling them, okay, the next time you do this, make sure you don't make these 5 mistakes you did last time. They're not going to grow. Okay.
Really?
Because, yes, you have put fear in their mind and stress and anxiety. Anxiety is more accurate than stress. Stress is an overall thing.
Mhm.
There's a concept called emotional granularity. It's simply a fancy way of saying know exactly how you're feeling, because feeling good or feeling bad is not accurate enough.
Mhm.
Do I feel anxious or do I feel frustrated or do I feel afraid? Those are
Mm,
three entirely different emotions caused by three different situations that have to be managed differently.
mm,
So if I'm frustrated, it means I didn't get what I wanted. If I'm anxious, it means I'm not sure of my abilities to handle an upcoming situation. That's where anxiety comes from. So if somebody is feeling anxiety or fear, they will revert to memory instead of imagination,
wow.
because memory is easier for the brain. It is much easier for the brain to remember than it is to imagine, because memory is part of pattern thinking. Pattern thinking is the easiest function the brain engages in. It's called the process of pattern recognition. It's what the brain does automatically every day. The pattern recognition function is called the default operating system of the brain. Always looking for patterns. Because when we find them, we fall into them. They become comfortable. We become productive. Problem is, patterns make us productive at what we already know. So if I'm afraid, I'm going to go to memory, which is what did I do last time? Okay, I did this last time and it saved me. I'm going to do it again. Well, we don't know that that's going to work the next time.
Right.
That's why imagination is so much more important than memory. Memory helps keep track of things, but imagination solves problems. So if I tell you that you're really good at things, like I talk to my troupe, if I happen to be hosting a show, I'll say, are there any improvs you guys want to do tonight that you really love to do? Some will say, I really like these three. Others will say, anything you put me in, I'm fine. Notice the difference between those two. The people who say anything you put me in, I'm fine, have experienced enough compliments that they're ready to handle anything. Those are the people I throw things at them they've never done before. Talk about growth. I push them off the cliff. But there's an old saying, and I can't remember who said it. I wish I could, but it said the saying is, we must learn to leap because then our wings will appear. You know, you
Wow.
jump off the cliff, you'll grow wings on the way down. So I push people off the cliff all the time. They just never think they're going to fail, and they don't. So they're always growing. The people who want to do the three things they're good at are relying on memory because that's what they're, stuck with. And, they'll grow smaller. It'll take longer for them.
This is
So
gold, man. I have never heard this stuff.
Stuff and man, oh, this is awesome. All
I'll
right,
tell you
let's
another thing.
go
I
ahead.
When I talk to the troop, I tell them, and I encourage leaders to keep this true as well in the way we talk to people. There's no such thing as a gift. I never tell people you have a gift for improv. A gift is something you're given for nothing, just because. You have a talent. Talent means you have the discipline and the time and the effort to grow a skill that made you good at something. You deserve acknowledgement for the hard work. Gifts, they're just there. So I tell my troupe, when you go out and meet the audience after the show and they say, wow, was this great? Do you say, oh, thanks, I'm glad you enjoyed it, and then just off put to the side? Do you deny the compliment by saying, oh, it's not that hard? Never, ever do that. One, you're denying something that somebody's giving you. They just gave you something, you said, I don't need it. You got to let that compliment wash over you and you got to live it for the next 2 days because our natural tendency is to remember the things we didn't do well. And
Yeah.
that inhibits growth. When somebody compliments you, really listen to it and then say, I'm really glad you appreciated it. Thank you. I worked hard for this. And,
Right.
and I'm glad my hard work paid off. But then
Yeah.
listen to it. What exactly did they say I was good at? Wow. Did I know that about myself? And if I did, I'm gonna add another little chip. And if I didn't, I'm gonna be woken up by somebody else's observation.
Yeah.
And if somebody says to you, you could have done this better or that better, first thing you should say is what kids say. How do you know? Kids always say, well, how do you know? And that's a good thing because most of the time, and this was printed up in the Harvard Business Review, most observations of a negative kind given in the workplace have nothing to do with you. It has something to do with the person's own insecurities and they're projecting it onto you. So don't listen to that because how do they know?
hmm I talk a lot of times about
Celebrating the wins. And I think we are too, especially as leaders, it's always about the next hill. Okay, or moving the next rock, right? The whatever metaphor you want to use. But the idea is a leader's looking for what's keeping us where we are, what do we need to move out of the way to get, but we don't stop to just celebrate, hey, we just made that first leg of the journey. Let's party. We made it. We're here. That kind of a thing, rather than just immediately turning to what's the next challenge? What do I need to work on?
That's kind of an Eastern Western mentality split. And the Western mentality is unsustainable. We're seeing it with the way we treat the planet. We can't keep using resources because they're going to run out. Growth is not always going to be upward. Eastern mentality is this is an old Zen philosophy chop wood, carry water. And the whole phrase is before you become enlightened, you get enlightenment by chopping wood and carrying water. Just do your stuff. After you become enlightened, chop wood and carry water. Because It's just daily, are you feeling good? Is this working? We don't have to have double digit growth every year. You know why? Because that's impossible. It's unsustainable. Just, is everybody happy? Is everybody doing what they're good at? And are we doing what we're meant to do? Every day we at Stevie Ray's Improv Company say, why are we in existence as a company? We ask ourselves that all the time. Are we fulfilling that promise? And if we are, financial growth, that can happen, but it sometimes won't. And that's not how we judge ourselves.
Hmm. So what is the win for Stevie Ray's?
We have an internal philosophy. It's called the three big words philosophy. Actually, one of my books I wrote was about that, which starts with the three big words are what three words define success for whatever you do. And if those three words are accomplished, then you're doing well. Before you get to the three big words, it's the big question, which is, why do you exist? Why does your organization exist? And I've worked with a lot of organizations that have pondered that question. It takes weeks to figure it out because it's not what's your function, it's why do you exist? I worked with one of the big retail operations, and you'd think that they exist to sell stuff, they're retail. And I said, no, 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 that's a lousy reason to exist. And it's also unsustainable because there are other places that sell stuff. Why do you exist that makes you unique? They finally broke it down to make someone smile today. And then they could look at all of their members and say, what did you do to make someone smile today? Did you follow the three big words? Like in
So
our
what are the
improv,
three big words for Stevie
Stevie
Ray's? You're
Ray,
killing me
well, we have
here.
different services. So we have the
Okay.
comedy shows, we have the classes, we have my keynotes. Each of those have three different big words, even though they all fall under the same reason we exist. Our reason to exist, improve someone's life. That's it.
Okay.
How could that relate to a comedy show? How are you going to improve someone's life? So they're laughing, big deal. Well, we discovered it by listening to our audiences. We had somebody put a note on the table before they left after a show that we found when we were cleaning up. It said, thank you so much. I have cancer and I only have 6 months to live. This was on my bucket list.
Wow.
Yeah. I took that back to the troupe and I said, we are not just doing a comedy show.
Right.
We improved someone's life. We had somebody tell us that they had a family member pass away and they hadn't laughed in a year. They came to our show and they said, thank you for bringing laughter back into my life. Okay. We improve someone's life that way.
Right.
So our classes have to be three words: fun, challenging, and safe. Safe, fun, and challenging. We took weeks to figure out which three words would fit because they have to be emotional words, not technical ones.
Sure.
Has to be a safe environment. People are trying something weird and new for the first time. And then we asked our team.
What book is this one? Do you
Remember the title of this book?
Three big words.
It's just called Three Big Words. Okay,
Yep.
very cool.
So
Our time is quickly running, and
I just want to keep talking to you, but I want to make sure because it's something we promise every one of our listeners, and that is we always want to get practical. So we've been dealing a lot with the philosophy behind it. I know you've given us some examples, but how can we, like, what are a couple maybe tips or ideas of ways that we can take that improv mindset into our everyday life?
First, one of the key tenets of improvisation is you avoid negations. When somebody offers an idea, if you don't agree with it, you tend to negate it, and you do so by saying the word but or however. That's a good idea, but I can see how that might work. However, we call it a negation because in psychological terms, they've discovered that when you say the word but, people can't remember what came before that word. It clears out all the positive things you said. Oh, yeah, Jason, I can understand how you might want to blah, 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 but all that's gone now.
Wow.
So it's worthless. So you use yes and instead of yeah, but. Yes
Mm,
and means I acknowledge what you said, even if I disagree with it. The yes is at least acknowledging it. And what are we going to do with it? So yes and, yes if, yes so should replace yeah, but. Good leaders should never use the word but or however.
mm.
Leaders are taught if you're going to give feedback, start with a positive before you say a negative. Lousy advice.
Really?
Yes, because it contains a negation
Mm,
and it kills trust. If I say, Jason, I got your evaluation for the last year here. Your team members really like your positive attitude and how well you're willing to jump into everything. Can you feel a but coming?
hmm.
I just canceled all the positive.
Wow.
Now, after it kills memory of positive, it kills trust of what's coming up because now you got to defend yourself. We trust children because they don't do this. Children don't say, I can understand why you pushed me down while playing tag. However, it's, hey, don't do that, period.
So what do I do with it?
An employee who's underperforming or not doing what they're supposed to, or how do I bring
Honest,
anything?
respectful honesty,
Okay.
respectful honesty. That comes from Patrick Lencioni's The Five Dysfunctions of a Team. But it's, hey, you know that thing you did? That doesn't work here. So please don't do that again. We're done. Okay. There's no attack. There's no thing. You understand what's expected, and there you go. It's feedback. The funny thing is, the next time I give you a compliment, you're going to trust that. But if you go the positive to get to a negative, or that critique sandwich, positive, negative, positive, you don't know what to trust because everything's
Uh,
a setup.
mm.
You know, you're not talking to me like I'm an adult. You're dancing around the issue. So, first thing leaders can do is get rid of ever saying but or however. And that's a daily reminder. It takes a lot of work to get negations out of your mind. Second, do what I do, which is constantly practice putting a transactional relationship into a personal one because it keeps us sharp for every communication. By that, I mean, if I'm going to be in a transactional relationship at the bank, at the grocery store, quick in and out, I never go through that by just keeping it transactional. I will talk to the person outside of the transaction. I'll compliment their hair. I'll compliment the suit and tie. I'll make a joke. I went in the plane just yesterday coming back from out of town. I walked on the plane. Transactional relationship is going to happen with the flight attendants. Hi, welcome aboard. Hi, welcome aboard. First thing I said was, hi, I ordered patio seating. They laughed. It connected. It's that quick. That keeps me sharp. So every interaction I have, I'm ready to make it connected rather than just let it happen. I do those all the time wherever I go, whether it's a grocery store, the bank, wherever. I'm always connecting a transactional relationship to a personal one, makes me a better leader because then I'm able to communicate with people on the spot, connected and ready to go.
Okay, that's good. Any last final words related
To our topic today?
I think every leader should take an improv class and they should take it from my company.
Love
Was
it.
that self-serving?
Yeah. Well,
Rats.
that's a great segue.
Because I wanted to talk about just real quickly, just wanted to promote the comedy cabaret at the Chanhassen Dinner Theaters. That's in Minnesota, right outside of Minneapolis, right? The
Yes.
Chanhassen there, the dinner theaters. And then obviously Stevie Ray has keynotes, workshops for company training, those kinds of things. Where can folks get in touch with you?
Just go to stevierays.org and I'm right there.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for being our guest. This has
Been really, really rich. I need to go back and listen to it myself, and I'm going to take down a lot of notes because lots of stuff to just really challenge our thinking. So thank you for our time.
Thanks for having me, sir.
Yep.